Steve Harvey was in the middle of what seemed like a routine holiday episode of Family Feud when something happened that would leave him completely speechless and fighting back tears. The studio was decorated beautifully for Christmas, with garland draped across the stage, twinkling lights everywhere, and a massive tree that sparkled under the bright studio lights. It was December, just over a week before Christmas, and the energy in the room was festive and warm. The Merrick family from Portland, Oregon, was competing against the Chen family from Atlanta, Georgia. Both families were dressed in their holiday best, ready to win some prize money for the season. Everything about the taping seemed perfectly normal, until Steve started doing the family introductions and heard a story that would change the entire direction of the show. The Merrick family had already won the first round. The family consisted of Dalton Merrick, a 72-year-old retired electrician with kind eyes and silver hair, his wife Barbara, who he'd been married to for 48 years, their daughter Christine, who was a high school counselor, her husband Marcus, and their son Trevor, who had just graduated from college. They were a close family, finishing each other's sentences and celebrating every correct answer with genuine enthusiasm. When Steve got to Dalton during the introductions, something about the man's quiet demeanor caught his attention. Dalton had a warmth about him, but there was also something else. A sadness, maybe, or a longing that Steve couldn't quite put his finger on. "So Dalton," Steve said with his trademark smile, 72 years young, "tell me about yourself. What did you do before you retired?" "I was an electrician for 45 years, Dalton replied, his voice steady and warm. "Residential and commercial. I liked it because I got to help people, you know? Make their homes brighter, safer. There's something satisfying about that." "That's beautiful, man," Steve said genuinely. "And I see you've got your beautiful wife Barbara here. 48 years of marriage?" Barbara beamed and squeezed her husband's hand. 48 wonderful years. Well, mostly wonderful." He snores. The audience laughed, and even Dalton chuckled. "She's not wrong about that." Steve grinned. 48 years is incredible, though. What's the secret?" "Patience," Barbara said immediately, "and understanding. Dalton came into my life with some heavy baggage, and I had to learn that healing takes time, but it was worth every moment." Steve picked up on the shift in tone. "Heavy baggage? You want to share that with us?" Dalton took a breath, and his daughter Christine put a supportive hand on his shoulder. "It's okay, Dad. You can tell them." "Well," Dalton began, his voice catching slightly, "when I was 12 years old, my family went through something really difficult. We lost our home right before Christmas. My parents were overwhelmed trying to figure out what to do with 4 kids and nowhere to live. Extended family stepped in to help, but they were scattered across different states." He paused, clearly composing himself. "I have a twin brother, identical twin. His name is Sterling. We were inseparable our whole lives. Same clothes, same interests, same everything. But when the family had to split up temporarily, Sterling went with our aunt to Minnesota, and I went with our uncle to Oregon. Our parents kept the 2 younger kids. Everyone promised it would just be for a few months until things got sorted out." The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. Steve's expression had shifted from his usual playful demeanor to something more serious and compassionate. "What happened?" Steve asked gently. "Life happened," Dalton said simply. "My uncle's job transferred him to a different city. In the chaos of moving, we lost contact information. This was 1964. No internet, no cell phones, no easy way to track people down. My parents tried, but they were struggling themselves. Sterling's aunt remarried and moved. Every lead went cold." Christine spoke up, her voice thick with emotion. "I grew up hearing about Uncle Sterling. Dad would tell us stories about the things they did together as kids. How they had their own language, how they could feel when the other one was hurt or sad. He's been searching my entire life." 60 years, Dalton said quietly. "It's been 60 years since I've seen my brother, since I've talked to him, since I've known if he's okay." Barbara wiped her eyes. Every Christmas, Dalton does something that breaks my heart and fills it at the same time. Tell them, honey. Dalton looked almost embarrassed. It's probably silly, but I buy 2 of everything for Christmas. 2 ornaments, 2 stockings, 2 sets of lights for the tree, 1 for my house, and 1 that I keep in a box in the garage. I kept thinking, what if Sterling shows up? What if he comes home for Christmas? I want him to know I saved his share. That I never forgot. There wasn't a dry eye in the studio. Even the camera operators were discreetly wiping their faces. Steve had to take a moment to compose himself. That is one of the most beautiful things I have ever heard, Steve said, his voice thick with emotion. 60 years of keeping your brother's Christmas alive. That's love, man. That's real brotherly love. I just want him to know I never stopped looking, Dalton said, tears now flowing freely. I want him to know that not a single day went by that I didn't think about him, that I didn't wonder if he was happy, if he had a good life, if he found someone to love. I want him to know that losing him was like losing half of myself. Trevor, Dalton's grandson, put his arm around his grandfather. Grandpa tells me I'm named after Sterling's middle name. He wanted to keep the name in the family somehow. Steve noticed his producer signaling from the side of the stage. There was an urgency in her expression, but also something else. Excitement, maybe. After years of hosting, Steve knew when something was about to happen. Dalton, Steve said carefully, when your family applied to be on Family Feud, your grandson Trevor filled out the application. You remember that? I do. Dalton nodded. He's the one who convinced us to apply. Said it would be fun to try to win some money for the holidays. And, Trevor, Steve turned to the young man, you mentioned your grandfather's story about Sterling in the application. In pretty specific detail. Trevor looked a bit nervous. I did. I thought maybe if it was on TV, someone might see it who knew something. I know it was a long shot, but Grandpa has been looking for so long. I had to try. Steve's eyes were glistening now. Trevor, what you don't know is that our producers read that application, and they took it very personally. They made it their mission to find Sterling Merrick. Dalton's hand went to his chest. His face went pale. What are you saying? I'm saying that our team spent weeks tracking down every lead. They contacted fire departments, looked through old city records, reached out to family genealogy databases. And Dalton, they found him. The studio erupted in gasps and exclamations. Dalton's legs seemed to give out, and Marcus quickly steadied him. Barbara was crying. Christine was crying. Trevor had his hands over his mouth in shock. You found Sterling? Dalton could barely get the words out. You found my brother? We did, Steve confirmed, his own voice breaking. He's been looking for you too. He never stopped. He kept his own box of Christmas decorations in his attic, waiting for the day you'd come home. Dalton was openly sobbing now, his whole body shaking. Where is he? Can I call him? Can I see him? Steve smiled through his tears. Dalton, I need you to turn around, brother. What? I need you to turn around, Steve repeated gently. He's right behind you. For a moment, Dalton didn't move, couldn't move. Then, slowly, trembling, he turned toward the wings of the stage. Walking out from behind the curtain was a man who looked exactly like Dalton. Same silver hair, same kind eyes, same way of carrying himself. Sterling Merrick was 72 years old, wearing a blue sweater and khakis, and his face was already wet with tears before he even made it fully onto the stage. Dalton? Sterling's voice cracked. Sterling, Dalton whispered. And then he was moving. The two brothers met in the center of the stage and embraced so tightly, it looked like they might never let go. They were both crying, their shoulders shaking with sobs that came from 60 years of separation, 60 years of wondering, 60 years of missing the other half of themselves. The audience was on their feet, applauding and crying. The Chen family was crying. Every crew member had stopped what they were doing to watch. And Steve Harvey, who had seen countless emotional moments in his career, stood there with tears streaming down his face. I thought I'd never see you again, Dalton said into his brother's shoulder. I thought you were gone forever. I'm here, Sterling said, pulling back to look at his brother's face, touching it like he needed to confirm he was real. "I'm here, Dal. I found you. We found each other." They looked at each other for a long moment, and then both started laughing through their tears. "You look old," Sterling said. "You look older," Dalton shot back, and they both laughed harder. Steve approached them, his own face wet with tears. "Gentlemen, I have been hosting this show for a long time. I have seen a lot of families, a lot of reunions, but this right here, this is something special." He gestured for them to sit on the Family Feud steps. The game was completely forgotten now. This was about something far more important than points or prizes. "Sterling," Steve said, "tell us your story. Where have you been all these years?" Sterling kept one hand clasped in Dalton's, like he was afraid if he let go, his brother might disappear. "When Aunt Marie took me to Minnesota, she promised it would be temporary. But then she got remarried, and her new husband got transferred to Wisconsin, then Iowa, then Kansas. By the time I was 16, I'd been to 5 different schools." He paused, his voice thick with emotion. "I asked about Dalton constantly, begged my aunt to help me find him. She tried, but every phone number was disconnected. Every address was old. It was like my whole family had vanished." "I did the same thing," Dalton said. "Uncle Frank tried to help me search, but we always hit dead ends. The records from back then were all paper. Once they were lost or misfiled, they were gone." "What kept you going?" Steve asked. 60 years is a long time to hold on to hope." Sterling smiled sadly. "The Christmas decorations. Every year I'd buy 2 of everything. One set for my tree and one set I'd pack away. I kept thinking, maybe this is the year. Maybe this Christmas, Dalton will knock on my door." Dalton's head snapped up. "You did that too?" "Every single year." "So did I," Dalton said in wonder. "I have a whole garage full of decorations I've been saving for you." The brothers stared at each other, and then Dalton started laughing. "We really are identical, aren't we? Even after 60 years apart, we're doing the same things." "Twin telepathy," Sterling said with a watery smile. "Mom used to say we were cosmically connected." Steve turned to the audience. "Do you hear this? 60 years apart and they're still in sync. That's the bond of twins, y'all. That's the bond of brothers." Barbara and Christine came over, and Sterling was introduced to his sister-in-law and niece for the first time. Barbara hugged him tightly. "I've heard so much about you. Dalton talks about you all the time. You're already part of our family." "I have a family too," Sterling said, gesturing toward the wings. "Can they come out?" A woman in her late 60s walked onto the stage, followed by 2 men in their 40s and a younger woman in her 30s. Sterling's wife Margaret looked kind and gentle, with a warm smile. Their sons, Jackson and Elliot, were tall and had their father's eyes. Their daughter Nicole was wiping tears from her face. "This is my family," Sterling said proudly. "Margaret and I have been married for 46 years. These are our kids. And Dalton, you're a great uncle to 7 grandchildren." "7?" Dalton's eyes widened. "I have 3 grandkids. That means we have 10 grandkids between us who've never met." "That's about to change," Trevor said firmly. "We're having the biggest family Christmas ever this year." Steve was smiling now, even as tears continued to fall. "Can I bring out more of Sterling's family? Because we've got some people waiting." 3 teenagers and 4 younger children came running onto the stage, and suddenly there was chaos in the best possible way. The grandchildren were meeting for the first time, cousins discovering cousins, families merging right before everyone's eyes. "This is unreal," Jackson said to Christine. "We have a whole other branch of the family we didn't know about." "Tell me about it," Christine replied. "I always wanted more cousins growing up." Steve let the families mingle for a few minutes before gently bringing everyone back together. "I want to know more." "Sterling, Dalton, what were you like as kids? Before you got separated?" The brothers looked at each other and started talking in that way that twins do, finishing each other's sentences and speaking almost in unison. "We were troublemakers," Dalton started. "Always getting into things," Sterling continued. "We had this game where we'd pretend to be each other. Switch classes at school. Mom could never tell us apart. Dad could, though." He said Sterling had a freckle behind his left ear. "Still do," Sterling said, turning his head to show Dalton, who immediately looked and laughed. "So do I. Dad was making that up." The families were laughing and crying at the same time. Steve was shaking his head in amazement. "You two are still in sync. After 60 years, you're still finishing each other's sentences." "Tell them about the Christmas tradition," Margaret prompted her husband gently. Sterling's expression became more serious. "When Dalton and I were kids, we had this thing we did every Christmas Eve. We'd sneak downstairs after everyone was asleep, and we'd sit by the tree and make wishes. We'd each make one wish for ourselves and one wish for the other." Dalton continued, the memory clearly emotional for him. "That last Christmas before we got separated, I wished that Sterling would always be happy and safe. I wished the same thing for you," Sterling said, his voice breaking. "And then the next day, everything fell apart. I spent the next 60 years hoping my wish came true for you, even if I couldn't be there to see it." There wasn't a sound in the studio except for quiet crying. Even the normally rambunctious audience was completely still, absorbed in the story of these two brothers. "Did it?" Sterling asked quietly. "Were you happy? Were you safe?" Dalton nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I had a good life, Sterling. Barbara made me happy. My kids made me happy. My work made me happy. But there was always this hole, you know? This piece missing. I was happy, but I wasn't whole." "Same here," Sterling said. "Margaret and the kids gave me everything I could ask for, but I always felt like I was looking over my shoulder for someone who wasn't there." Steve wiped his eyes with a handkerchief. "And now you're here, both of you, together again after 60 years. "It doesn't feel like 60 years, Dalton said, looking at his brother. "It feels like yesterday and forever at the same time." "I know exactly what you mean," Sterling agreed. The Chin family, who had been patiently waiting to continue their game, approached. The matriarch of the family, Linda, walked up to the brothers with tears in her eyes. "My brother passed away when we were young," she said softly. "I never got to tell him how much he meant to me. Seeing you two reunite is healing something in my heart. This is beautiful." Steve turned to both families and made a decision. "You know what? We're not playing a regular game today. Today is about miracles and reunions and family. Both families are getting the maximum prize because what we're witnessing here is worth more than any game." The audience applauded loudly. The Chen family graciously accepted, understanding that they were part of something extraordinary. Steve addressed Dalton and Sterling. "I want to know about the search. How did you try to find each other over the years?" Dalton spoke first. "I hired private investigators 3 different times, spent thousands of dollars. Every lead went nowhere. I contacted every Sterling Merrick I could find on social media, but none of them were you. I even tried DNA databases, but you have to submit your DNA for it to work, and I guess you never did." "I did the same things," Sterling said. "The internet gave me hope. You know, I thought, surely with all this technology, I could find one person. But Dalton Merrick is more common than you'd think. I called so many people, sent so many messages. None of them were you." "How did the producers find you?" Barbara asked, curious. Steve's producers stepped onto the stage. "We started with fire department records from Portland in 1964. We found the incident report that mentioned the family displacement. From there, we tracked down the aunt who took Sterling to Minnesota through old city directories. Her obituary mentioned surviving family members. We followed that thread through 3 states and 4 cities until we found Sterling in Phoenix." "Phoenix?" Dalton turned to his brother. "You're in Phoenix?" "For the past 20 years, Sterling confirmed. "We moved there when I retired. Margaret has arthritis, and the warm weather helps." "We're only 2 states apart," Dalton said in wonder. "We've been 2 states apart this whole time, and we couldn't find each other." "Until now," Steve said firmly. Until today. Until this moment when God decided it was time for two brothers to come home to each other. He turned to address the audience and the cameras. Ladies and gentlemen, what we're witnessing here is proof that it's never too late. Never too late to find your family. Never too late to heal old wounds. Never too late for miracles. Trevor spoke up. Mr. Harvey, can I say something? Of course, son. When I wrote about Grandpa in the application, I didn't really think anything would come of it. I just wanted him to know I tried. You know? That I didn't give up on, finding Uncle Sterling even if nobody else could. But you and your team, you made an old man's dream come true. You gave him back his brother. That's not just a TV show. That's a miracle. Steve walked over and hugged Trevor. You did this, young man. You told the story. You put it out there. Never underestimate the power of sharing someone's truth. The family spent the next hour on stage, not playing Family Feud, but just being together. Stories were shared, photos were exchanged on phones, plans were made. The grandchildren were already forming groups and friendships. The adult children were marveling at how they had entire cousins they'd never known about. Christmas, Sterling said suddenly. We have to spend Christmas together. Our first Christmas in 60 years. Our place, Dalton said immediately. Portland. You all come to Portland. We'll do it right. The whole family. The whole family. Sterling agreed, his eyes welling up again. I can't believe I get to say that. The whole family. As the taping finally came to an end, Steve gathered everyone for one final moment. Dalton, Sterling, I want to know, what's the first thing you want to do together? The brothers looked at each other, and a slow smile spread across both their faces at the same moment. Christmas Eve, they said in unison. We're going to sit by the tree, Dalton continued, and make wishes, Sterling finished. But this time, Dalton said, his voice full of emotion, we're wishing together. Steve turned to the camera one final time. If you're watching this and you've lost touch with someone you love, don't give up. Keep trying. Keep hoping. Keep those Christmas decorations packed away if that's what it takes, because you never know when your moment will come, when your miracle will happen. He looked at the two identical 72-year-old men standing side by side, hands clasped like they might never let go. These two brothers spent 60 years apart, but they never gave up hope. They kept the faith, and now, just in time for Christmas, they get to come home to each other. The audience gave a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. The brothers embraced one more time, and the image of them holding each other after 6 decades apart became one of the most iconic moments in Family Feud history. After the cameras stopped rolling, the families stayed for another hour, reluctant to part ways now that they'd found each other. Phone numbers were exchanged, group chats were created, flight arrangements were discussed. 2 weeks, Dalton said to Sterling as they prepared to finally leave the stage. 2 weeks until Christmas. You'll be there? I'll be there, Sterling promised. With bells on. Literally. Margaret always makes me wear this ridiculous Christmas sweater with jingle bells. Barbara makes me wear one too, Dalton laughed. We really are the same person. After the show, for the first time in 60 years, two brothers spent Christmas together, proving that some bonds are truly unbreakable, some love truly lasts forever, and sometimes, if you never give up hope, Christmas miracles really do come true.